Hi there, just read this disclaimer please. Alright guys, so kind of out of video ideas again, but luckily I've had something that has prompted a thought. So I was just watching this PensionCraft video a little while ago. It's really interesting. It's about, he'll be glad to know that I've watched loads of adverts whilst making this video, so hopefully I'm adding to his revenue. But basically this video is about how much to save for retirement. Right, so this is what I like, obviously. He's made this spreadsheet where assumed some inflation of 0%, wage growth of 3%, investment returns of 4%, which earlier in the video he went into the reasons why. But it's good to be conservative anyway, even if you think 4% is a low return. So then he's just kind of accumulated from age 19, or is it age 20 to age whatever, and he's used the data here to estimate the total savings. He's called it savings, but I mean I think it's invested really. Lower down in the spreadsheet it goes from investing to, he's assumed that at age 69 you retire. So what he's done is he's set the age at 69. I mean, for me, that's not something I would do. It's not something I would do for my own life. I've saved as much as possible to retire as early as possible. I haven't just set a arbitrary date where I want to retire. I've just gone for it as much as possible to go earlier than 69. But I guess it fits in with the state pension, so it's kind of we'll let that assumption lie. And then he plots a graph of how your portfolio's value will rise and then how it will deplete as you go into retirement from age 69 down. And so what it's done is it's used wage growth of 3% and inflation of 2%. So it's using the inflation to determine how much you need to spend in retirement. So as you can see here, retirement cost of 0 because you're not at retirement age yet, but then later in the video, when you get to retirement age at 69, suddenly you start paying that. And that number 52 grand, that's based on the 2% inflation rate from the same starting salary. So what I've done is I've recreated his spreadsheet. I mean, he says that the spreadsheet's there for us, but I actually think you need to be a Patreon supporter to get it. Because I've tried clicking, there's no link there, and if you click in there you need to be a Patreon supporter. So in the end I just recreated it myself, and I've managed to match his numbers, so it wasn't that tricky. And I've recreated the chart that he's done, and I've put in total return here of 4% as he has. But what we've got here is we've got inflation at 2% and wages at 3%. So what that ends up with is, so the year before your gross salary would be 82 grand adjusted for wage increases, and then the year after your spends are 52 grand, so a lot, 30 grand less. So that's the other assumption that is made. 15% of the salary, of the gross salary, is invested. That's what I've done to recreate his numbers. Okay, so now what he does here is at age 30 he assumes that there's like a 50% fall in the stock market or whatever you're invested in, and then he projects how the age the money runs out changes based on the shock at age 30. Now I've recreated these numbers. I mean, I made the comment below. This curve here seems to be very similar to the curve afterwards. So I think that what he's done is he's assumed that the 4% return is made there, and there's a 50% reduction here. But to me, I wrote a comment about it I wrote a comment here about it, and I've said that the 50% shock, or well, let me reiterate what I've written in the comment here. I think when you say the long-term returns are going to be 4%, I think that number includes market volatility. I think that if there's a big shock in the market, that's all baked into the 4% a year return, I think. So, but what he's done, if we look at the numbers, what he's done is, if we go to age 29 there, what he's done is he's put a minus 50% in there, so that recreates the same numbers as him. And I've got here that the value goes down to at age 84, which matches what he's got, age 84. But if you look lower down in my spreadsheet, what I've got here is the annual returns calculator. Let me undo the change I've made. What I've got here is the annual returns calculator calculation. So it's basically 100 years I've done for some reason, I don't know why. It's the index going from there to there, from age 20 to age 101, whatever, giving you the annual return over the whole period. So obviously the calculation is very simple because all the numbers are the same here, which is obviously very unrealistic. There'll be fluctuations, won't there? But if we do what he's done and put minus 50 there, that, if we scroll down, has reduced the annual returns over the long term. So where he's got it reducing it from age 86 to age 84, which I've matched, I've got the same numbers, I don't think it's realistic, because I think 4% returns over the long term are 4% returns over the long term. I don't think because we have a shock of minus 50% means that the long term returns go lower. I think it's just that the long term returns are lumpier. They're up 1 year, down 1 year. So what I've got here in sheet 2 is 3 different scenarios. The first scenario is where there's no shock. There's no 50% reduction anywhere. The second scenario is how our man at PensionCraft has done it, where he's kept the returns at 4% in all the other years and hence reduced the overall returns to 3.08%. And the third way is my way, where I've kept the long-term returns at 4% by adjusting all the other years to make up for the minus 50%. And what we see here is the blue line is the natural way if the returns were all exactly 4% every single year, year in, year out. The red line is PensionCraft's estimate, reducing it to 84 years. But actually, you'll see in my way of doing it, where the long-term returns are 4%, it actually makes the money last longer. He says here that in the S&P 500 fell 50% and took 6 years to get back to where it was. So let's do it a different way. Instead of having every single year in 100 being smooth like that, let's make up the minus 50% quicker. Let's make it up so that after 20 years in total, so 1 year of falling 50%, and then 19 years of growing back to get to our annual return of 4%. I mean, this might be a more realistic way of doing it, I'm not sure. If all of the other years go back to 4%, hopefully that gets us back straight. Even these numbers are unrealistic, of course. Maybe I don't need to say that, but yeah, so there we go. I've got it back now. So we're still making long-term returns that are the same, well, he's not. But the loss of 50% has been made up quicker. And as you can see, he says that it took 6 years to get back to where we were. So in this example, I've gone 100 on year 0, minus 50. So in my example, I've actually given it longer. I've given it 9 years to get back where we were. So actually, it's slightly better off. The second way I've done it is slightly better off, but not much. It doesn't make much of a difference by the looks of it. So I've done the second example where the 50% hit comes at age 40. And as you can see, he's got it running out of cash at age 81, and I've got it running out of cash at age 91. So it actually makes a massive difference, and it's actually still making it actually your money is lasting longer than if there wasn't a 50% hit, so long as the annual returns over the long run are the same, not down to 3.08% like in his example. So as you can see, there's how it looks on the graph. No shock, a shock but the long-term annual returns are the same, and a shock but the long-term annual returns are reduced to 3.08% at age 60. So I've put the numbers in there, and then as before, 19 years of 8% returns, but importantly 4%, fair comparison. And as you can see here, the green line is mine, obviously, and it's actually not that bad. So even though you retire at age 60, you've still got 69, you've still got 9 years of better growth. So that 8% growth that I was talking about really helps it not be so as bad as it could have been, because you've got 9 years of growing at my higher rate in my kind of assumptions. And actually, look at the end result there. It's really close. Age 86, you run out of money, but you're a bit worse off because you had 60 grand rather than 12 grand the year before. So you're a bit worse off, but not that bad really. I imagine the next examples where it really the crap hits the fan for anyone's assumptions. So I've got the minus 50 at the age of 70, and yeah, you see this. His different way of doing it makes less of a difference. Look, because he runs out of money age. Well, let's have a look here. He runs out of money age 77. My modelling runs out of money the year later, so not much different. And that's because that just couldn't be any more worse in terms of the timing. I mean, in reality, I don't know. I mean, it's hard to say. You could retire at age 69, and literally the next week, there's massively bad headlines. But I guess this is why you need to have a cash buffer, perhaps, or de-risk your portfolio. Okay, so I've put in the data for shock at age 80, and again, it's all very similar. So I think once you're in the once you're into retirement, it's really doesn't make that much of a difference, the returns, because you're chomping away at a 50% fall in price, aren't you? So yeah, his line and my line are pretty much identical, aren't they? So yeah, that's, I think, regardless of how high the returns, look, it just hasn't made a difference, has it? So I think this illustrates really that you need a cash buffer. Maybe 1 or 2 years worth of spends, at least 1 or 2 years worth of spend. The other thing, which is different from the way I've always thought as well, is that he's actually depleting the value of your worth down to zero, which I've never really thought about before. I mean, at the end of the day, I suppose some people just haven't got a choice. I mean, if you're not that well off, maybe you've worked minimum wage all your life, it just might not be feasible to even get close to being able to keep your capital and live off the income of a portfolio, or have your portfolio grow more than you're spending. I suppose some people it's just not possible. But yeah, it just never occurred to me that actually this is the way to plan it, because you can't take it with you, can you? I mean, in his response, he said to me, this kind of detail is irrelevant, as I was trying to show the sensitivity of a wealth shock at different points. And yeah, he's absolutely right. It's the difference between these charts at different points, which I've just shown myself. This is a disaster. If it happens here, it wasn't bad at all. In fact, if it happened there, you were better off. Anywhere here, you were fine. But here, it's a disaster no matter which way you look at it. Well, not a disaster, but it reduced by a few years how long your money will last. So yeah, I get his point, but I don't think it's irrelevant, because it does help. Because it does change the numbers when you keep it a fair comparison. 4% versus 3.08%, the way he's done the numbers. All right, that's all. Thanks for watching. Bye bye.